When watching a movie like Mad Max Fury Road, it's almost impossible not to get lost in this type of visual madness. Mad Max is one of the great technical achievements since the turn of the millennia, probably being the prime example on how to perfectly mix practical effects and CGI. It's also interesting to note that the film did not even have a screenplay. The entire project was actually laid out on storyboards, so even from the beginning, George Miller was more focused on telling a story visually instead of through long dialogue sequences. Despite this creative choice, Mad Max is able to communicate a very important message through minimal character interaction. In fact, what I appreciate most about the movie is how its message is not formulated for one specific political issue, but rather has a message that can translate through cultures and acts as a commentary on the human experience in general. One common observation about Mad Max is how at points Furiosa feels like the main character, but watching the movie again, it's clear that Miller runs the film's message through Max. Now, the message I'm referring to is set up in the film's very first scene.
So I exist in this wasteland. A man reduced to a single instinct. Survive.
We meet Max in an unforgiving world. The individual has been reduced to a resource for those who run the various societies. In the Citadel, Max is branded like livestock, and the little value he actually gets comes from the fact that he's a universal blood donor. And then apart from Max, there are the women being used for their milk, war boys are used as an enforcement tool, and obviously there are the breeders, which Immortan Joe has locked away in his vault. So kindness, compassion, humility, all of these things have vanished from this world. This seems to me like a very realistic way society might behave if there was a total collapse. Even nowadays you have some materialistic circles that think this way. But something I also thought was interesting about the Citadel and its society is how there is still a religious sentiment. You would think that most people would abandon the idea of an immaterial world after an apocalyptic event, but that is not the case here. You have thousands of war boys who grew up in a desolate society where they were looking for some sort of purpose, and Immortan Joe gave them that purpose in the form of a pseudo-religion and the promise of an afterlife. Getting back to Max, once he survives the incredible chase through the storm, he raises from the sand and he approaches Furiosa and the rest of the women for the first time, and we get the first true look of what type of man he is at this point. After taking control of the war rig, Max shoots the leg of Angharad as she tries to return to the vehicle. He has no care for these women despite their vulnerable position. He has observed the society they live in, and he understands the role they play specifically, but he shows no sympathy to them. He just wants to survive like everybody else, and having 5 women, a few of which are pregnant, he sees that as a barrier to his own survival. And it's not until Furiosa convinces Max that depending on Immortan Joe to be grateful is a bad play that Max agrees to take the women in. Another very important indicator of Max's moral state, which will echo later in the film, comes when Max refuses to give his name to Furiosa as she lays out her plan to escape the valley. He responds by saying, "Does it really matter what my name is?" And Max's name is really the only affiliation he has left with his former life and who he was in that former life. His family is gone, his moral code is gone, his entire world is gone. Connecting his name with where he is now just does not work for him, and that's easy to understand. You can make an argument that this entire story is simply one man's quest to remember his name. Rewatching the movie, I made it a point to see where Max begins to remember who he was, and I think defending the war rig from the bikers with Furiosa was very important, because he gets a front row seat to someone who's risking her life for humble reasons. Furiosa is an imperator and someone who has a fair amount of power in her society, but she risks everything in an attempt to find a better life for herself and the women. There is little doubt that Max, seeing that this type of person can still exist in such a horrific world, it has to have an effect on him. Now, the one specific scene where I think we see a major change in Max is the scene where he watches the death of Angharad. Not too long ago, Max was shooting that girl in the leg, and now he's clearly pleased to see her alive, then crushed to see her fall to her death, because it brings him back to the death of his own daughter. And after this event, I think Max makes it his mission to keep the rest of the women alive. The brides are the symbol of hope in this film, and there's one shot specifically, which I'll put on screen, which makes this pretty clear. When they are driving through the swamp, I guess you could call it a swamp, we get a shot where Max and Furiosa are covered in blue light, while the women in the back hold a little lantern, which covers them in a warm red light. This imagery harkens back to the idea that light shines in the darkness and the darkness has not overcome. It's a biblical idea originally, I believe, but across all cultures we encounter the same thought that no matter how bad things can get, there will always be one light source, no matter how dim, that we can find, and the women are the light source of this film. Max and Furiosa are the protectors. The second major turning point in Max's story and the film's message as a whole comes in the swamp when Max really proves his dedication to securing the safety of Furiosa and the brides.
Hey, you need to take the war rig half a click down the track.
What if you're not back by the time the engines are cooled?
Well, you keep moving.
After Max blows up all the attackers, he has a short conversation with Furiosa where she tells him that the women are looking for hope. And I think Max understood that pretty early on, and he wanted to see their hopes be realized, even though his own hopes died with his family, and the risk he takes in the swamp is evidence of that desire. Once the war rig finally makes it to the green place, or the fake green place, Max watches Furiosa's hopes and the hopes of the women drain away when they find out that it's nothing more than desert and a few older women. And I also find it interesting how that when they arrive, everybody goes out to greet the women except Max, who stays back. He clearly has no desire for relationships at this point in his life. When Furiosa offers Max a bike to come with them on a journey across the salt plain, Max says something very telling to Furiosa.
You know, hope is a mistake. If you can't fix what's broken, you'll go insane.
I don't actually think he believes those words completely. Returning to the women shortly later and proposing a plan to take the Citadel seems like evidence that he was just in the moment trying to lower their expectations for the future, and understandably so. Max himself has suffered greatly, and obviously the world around them has descended into complete madness. There has been a criticism about how the plot of the film is just going one place and then turning around and going back, but the creative decision seems to fit the film's message quite well. The film is not about improving an evil world. The film is about improving yourself in an evil world. A very common thing that people do when they're going through tough times is they think that maybe it's just the environment. Maybe if I just go here, things will get better. I'm not discounting that idea completely because I think it can be a factor for some people, but the reality is you take yourself with you wherever you go. And returning to the Citadel is symbolic of that message. Max is correct when he says the world is broken. There is no utopia just sitting around in the desert. They cannot fix the world, but they can fix themselves as individuals, and that's what Max's story is all about. The final battle on the way back to the Citadel completes the message of the film. The girls, their children, and the plant seeds are the hope that Max, Furiosa, and Nux, and the rest of the women are trying to preserve, and they give everything in their defense of it. The parallels in the final act are impossible to ignore. Nux begins the movie wanting to give his life for Immortan Joe, and ends the movie giving his life for the girls, specifically Riley Keogh's character. Then you have Max, who begins the movie getting his blood taken against his will, and ends the movie voluntarily giving his blood to save Furiosa. Both of these characters have improved themselves, and the path to improvement and the path to hope was not through acts of self-preservation. The path to improvement was paved by humility and sacrifice. Only after these humble actions is Max able to reconnect with his name and remember the moral man he was in his former life.
Max. My name is Max.
Max leaving the Citadel at the end is not surprising. He's not the type of character who's going to stick around and play house. Max has completed his mission, the girls and Furiosa are safe, and they can now go and try to remake the Citadel. The best way to conclude this video is with the actual end of the film because I think it pushes the message home in a beautiful way. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and look out for more videos in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I will talk to you soon. Have a good one.